Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. Welcome to yet another session of Avid Online. And for those joining us for the first time, a very special welcome. Please refer to the chat box for more information on Avid Learning, our platform, and our partners for this evening's discussion. As those living in the metropolitan cities of India, we often think of them as vanguards of arts and culture. However, around the vast country, there are several culturally diverse cities and towns, similar yet distinct in their character, waiting to be explored. With this zest and curiosity, at Avid Online, we began the series Cultural Capital Future Legacies of India Cities with our partners Live History India to bring our audiences closer to these cities, even if it's only virtually. Through these series, we've met several cultural pathbreakers, and in this 13th edition of Cultural Capitals is no different. Today, we're still close to home, talking to you about our sister city of Mumbai, Pune. Keeping up with our mantra that learning never stops, we've set the stage to learn about yet another cultural capital. Join me in welcoming our speakers for tonight. Curator of Literature, Meenakshi Alamchandani, co-founder, Come Home to Pune, Jaanvi Borauke, art writer and educator and co-founder, Artwalks Mumbai, Nishita Zachariah, architect and scholar, Sarah Melsens, who will be in conversation with Deputy Editor, Live History India, Aparna Andhare. For more about each of our speakers, please refer to their very impressive bios that have been posted in the chat section. Our speakers today will trace the evolution of the city through the lens of literature, art, culture, history, technology, and much more. And they'll discuss how a thriving cultural capital preserves its history and heritage and revitalizes its traditional cultures while dealing with the tussles of modern urban landscape. Please note the session will last 75 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A. Aparna will be taking questions, so please keep them posted in the Q&A box throughout. Don't wait till the end. On that note, thank you once again for tuning in. Over to you, Aparna, and look forward to a fascinating session. Thank you.
Thank you, Asad. For a change, only you have to make travel plans this time since I'm already in Pune. So you and Team Avid, of course, are very welcome to come over. If you leave as soon as we are done, you'll make it here for a latish dinner. And making travel easy and quick from between Bombay and Pune has been the top priority for governments for over centuries. It seems like the expressway expansion is only the latest in the effort. Let me quickly tell you the story of Pune. So Pune is further inland from Bombay, and ghats need to be scaled to get here. The first train journeys needed to be interrupted in Khopoli until the famous Borghat was conquered through engineering and innovations. This also led to the invention of my favorite snack of all time, chikki, whose history is a bit dark, involving unfair labor practices. And so that's not something we'll go into today. That's Borghat, and the train sort of comes back and then manages to make it through. It was an engineering marvel. Unfortunately, the bridge doesn't exist anymore. It was pulled down for the expansion of the expressway. But while you're going through, keep an eye out. You can still see the remains of a stone bridge. Anyway, we'll be going through Duke's Nose, past several forts, which on a good day are visible. In the monsoons, you can't see a thing. We're on an ancient trade route, on a pilgrimage route, as you can tell, because there are cave excavations right through and into a city that is now called the Queen of the Deccan. The weather is going to be instantly drier. Humidity of Bombay is gone, but warmth really exists. The built heritage of the area that we now know as Pune can be traced to the 8th century with extant temples and some of them incomplete. The city has its origins in Khilji times, so around the 13th century, when fortifications were first built. It was ruled by the Nizam Shahs of Ahmednagar, and Shahaji Bhosle, Shivaji's father, was given the fief of Pune in the early decades of the 17th century. In the 18th century, there were struggles with Aurangzeb, and an ambition to establish a great Maratha state was achieved under the Peshwas, and their leadership centered around Pune. So the whole country basically was ruled from Pune at one point. The rise of the Maratha Empire resulted in the construction of grand buildings like the Shanivar Vada. And as the capital grew, there were vadas that were built, temples, large living spaces, a zoo, and all the trappings that you would see in a powerful 18th century court. By the 19th century, there was another shift in power, and Pune was then under British control. Acting as a summer capital, it had important colonial buildings, including the residency, governor's mansions, which is now in the university, and several other buildings. There were cantonments like Khidki, battlefields that surrounded Pune, and you just can't forget that badminton was invented in Pune and was going to be called Pune. It was then finally called Badminton after Badminton House. But imagine we could play Pune at the Pune Club. Anyway, bridges were built over the rivers Mula and Mutha. Several institutions of national importance were founded. Pune led the freedom struggle, had an active role to play in social reforms, focused on education and social equality. Citizens of Pune were very interested in building the city. Bund gardens, several dams on rivers were sponsored by private citizens like Sir Jamshedji Jijaboy, famous JJ, also of Bombay, who built extensively here. So from the Oriental Institutes to the National Archives, from the film FTII, National Chemical Labs, Defense Research and Training, this city has attracted and nurtured education, training and development. In 1974, a guy called Rajneesh moved to Pune from Bombay, and the Osho Ashram was set up in Koregaon Park. In 75, the Iyengar Yoga Institute was established by BKS Iyengar, and the world, it seems, was coming to Pune for its spiritual and physical needs. As we speak of lifestyle, we have to mention the horse racing season, its flamboyant cosmopolitanism, fantastic palaces that were built by Maharajas who were visiting, and Pune was where people from several communities, from the famous Chitpavan Brahmins, Hindus, Parsis, Jews, Sindhis, Christians, everyone, Muslims, everyone thrived in Pune. In the last few years, Pune, from the pictures you've seen before, has become unrecognizable. It has grown several times, and the metropolitan region now covers two municipal corporations, 3 cantonment boards, and is still growing. The city has expanded to make space for IT, for educational campuses, and to accommodate people from all over the country seeking education, better employment, and a vibrant urban cultural life. Of course, if you were to ask a typical Pune person about it, she'd only have something sarcastic to say. So Pune has and is, of course, home to an astonishing number of important people, present panel included, of course, social reformers, artists, writers, historians, philanthropists, activists, people like Jyotirba and Savitribai Phule, Ranade, Tilak, Bhandarkar, Pandita Ramabai, David Sassoon, Bhim Singh Joshi, Narayan Murthy, Ibrahim Al-Qazi, Pula Deshpande. I can go on for an hour just listing people who are either from Pune or have built their careers in Pune and have contributed to a city like this. But it's now time for me to wrap up my little capsule and to get our panelists on. And let's start with someone who's furthest away physically from Pune, Meenakshi, who is originally from here and now lives in Canada. Meenakshi, thank you very much for waking up super early. I'm going to start you off with a simple question. What is your relationship with the city?
Pune is the city of my birth. It's home, no matter as a third generation immigrant, as I should say. My parents came to Pune post-partition, and then I moved out of Pune to Canada. But Pune still has this sense of home. I walk down Main Street, or what they call MG Road now, and I like it. I like the idea of saying, okay, this is heritage here around me.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meenakshi, your life basically around Pune revolves around literature and heritage. That's what you do. So can you take us through a few memories, perhaps, and tell us about your relationship with the city?
Okay. My earliest memory of Pune is a very young 6-year-old being taken to Manny's bookshop by my mother. who incidentally went to the Deccan College to do her degree in architecture and anthropology, and she was a great reader. So Manny's was like her mecca, and she took me to Manny's, and she was on a very limited income, and she said every month you can buy 2 books, and that's how I built up my library. So that's my earliest memory of Pune.
Dhwani, do you want to bring up our pictures? Sorry, that's Loki Dog, and he has strong opinions about Pune too. This is the Deccan College.
Yes, that's my mother's alma mater. And I always loved going there because they had this wonderful collection of old maps of history, of archaeological finds, and it's beautiful.
It is, absolutely.
Architecturally as well, the structure is so lovely, and the grounds. And then, of course, the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute was another place, Bori as it's colloquially known, is where I came in and I found the manuscripts in Prakrit, and, also where one of the first dictionaries has been developed. And Pune has always been a center for lexicography. So for me, Pune means heritage, Pune means language, and both in writing in English as well as in Marathi. As you may not be aware or may be aware, there is this great cultural divide of this side of the river and that side of the river.
We'll come to that, I'm sure. And this is on Main Street.
This is on East Street. On East Street, it's the Albert Edward Institute, which is run by the Dinshaw Trust. It was a free library. I think now you have to pay for it. And incidentally and interestingly enough, this used to be the cantonment jail. And I spent many hours at the Albert Edward Institute. And of course, here's Manny's. Now, I was looking for the older images of Manny's, which I couldn't find. Manny's was situated in this ramshackle old building where the West End Cinema used to be, right next door. Now, West End Cinema was this one cinema which showed only English movies. And you went there, you sat on easy chairs, and of course, mice ran over your feet.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we've got lots to talk about, or lots of old Pune memories, and from someone who was born in Pune to, like me, is a new Pune resident. Nishita, thank you for joining us. We won't remember old Pune, but you've now been walking around and looking at Pune and have explored it quite extensively. So, what is your relationship with the city, Nishita?
So unlike Meenakshi, I wasn't born here. I didn't study here. I only moved here as an adult with a young family. So I've joined, I think, the thousands that have made Pune home for its incredible potential, diverse cultural offerings. And for me, especially, I think it's important also because it's close to Bombay, where I continue to work and I have family. So its proximity has helped. My relationship, I'm going to be funny about this, but it's true. My relationship with the city is still in the dating stage. Dates like experiences, like for me, getting involved with spaces like TIFA Working Studios or VHC Gallery, finding friends and alumni from MSU and friends beyond that within the art circle, finding a stitching circle to join recently has been full of sort of promise for things that I can do in the city. So for me, Pune is always about the experience. So the images, Dhwani, if you'd like to bring them up, the images that I've picked are actually just snapshots of the Pune that I know and the Pune of my sort of experience. Pune's driving, I have to say, is legendary. Anybody who's been on the roads here is going to understand what I mean by that. But there's a charm to it in all the chaos and the wrong side driving and all of that. There's a charm to it. And I think it's also because there's so much to see for me. I think that's the charm part of it. Like, for example, this is a mural that I saw driving back from another experience that I had, which is a farm visit. Again, something that you can only do in Pune. And it's sort of art everywhere, which I've noticed in Pune. Walls are painted beautifully. Underpasses have different things. And I think Bombay also is doing similar things, but for me, Pune just does it better. Next one, please, Lani. Another thing that I really love is the communities that Pune has managed to build. I'm familiar, again, only with sort of the communities that have been built around the visual arts. This particular space is a space that Aarti Kirloskar, who I don't know if you can recognize in the picture, but she owns it. It's, I think, part of the farmland somewhere near Chandni Chowk. And this is a studio workshop by a very interesting young printmaker called Sachin Nimbalkar, where he's teaching art enthusiasts, artists, in this wonderful open air space, how to make their own prints. So the basics of linocut and woodcut were sort of demonstrated, and they had a hands-on experience for about a week. So I think experiences like this is what makes Pune really special for me. Next one. I don't think I gave you captions. I'm so sorry. This is there only for the wow factor, I have to say. It is bread, butter, and pottery. Three of the things that made Aparna and me really happy sometime last year when we got to go to Curators of Clay. They had curated a morning brunch sort of thing where they'd invited Trustworthy to do the bread and butter, and they'd served it up and plated it up on these gorgeous handmade, hand-thrown plates by Curators of Clay. Yeah, I think I don't have it in the picture, but we were also using little ceramic knives to sort of spread that delicious butter on the warm bread. And my final picture for this presentation is actually the Mandai. So this is the Mahatma Phule Mandai in town. And it is actually a market. It is a functional market. It's a historic building. And what they do is it's an annual festival that they call Art Mandai. It happens on the 26th of Jan, spearheaded by Gauri Gandhi, who teaches, I think, at Flame, if I'm not mistaken. And they basically have artists, makers, craftspeople displaying and selling their wares next to market folk. And it's really interesting to sort of see how people engage with this space, with art in this unique space. And I think this particular image for me sort of encapsulates what art is in Pune. It is for everyone. It is by everyone. It is like at Artworks, we say art is for everyone, but I don't think a lot of spaces or places are able to sort of encapsulate it as well as Pune does. A lot of the art spaces here you'll see have drama, dance, theater, curated shows, sort of craft shows, furniture, everything thrown in together, and it's a full experience. So yeah, that is my Pune.
There's so much that I'd like to ask you about this. And I remember the morning of bread, butter, and ceramics at the Curators of Clay. It was, I think that was the morning that I fell in love with the city, with the open, with the open, the fact that we could drive around. But there's a lot about Pune that has that comes together simply because of its architectural heritage, and not just heritage, but we're talking about contemporary architecture too, which is essentially the architecture that we inhabit. And that's when I'd like to bring Sarah in, who has, if Nishita is in the dating stage, and Sarah is definitely married and is in a long-term relationship with Pune, and you've been working on Pune for your PhD too. So Sarah, if I can ask you, what is your relationship with the city?
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I first came to Pune in 2010, and this was actually just on a short holiday visit with classmates from architecture course in London. And I ended up marrying the classmate who was from Pune and who had invited us over. So after that, yeah, it's been already 10 years now that Pune is my home. And I work as an architect and I teach at architecture colleges here. But as you already mentioned, I think my relationship to the city really changed when I started my doctoral research, which was looking at the social cultural history of the architectural profession in Pune. And I have a couple of slides for that too. Dwayne, if you could bring it up. So my quest actually was to understand like who were the first qualified architects in Pune, who were the engineers who left an impact on the city. And first of all, I was trying to find out which offices were important in the early 20th century. So I approached a lot of architects. I interviewed descendants of architects, and I was lucky enough to discover a couple of wonderful private archives, which are basically office archives where architects keep copies of their drawings, as well as architectural records, so letters which explain a lot about how Pune's built environment was actually brought into being. And so after that, I was particularly interested to look at the transcultural exchange and how it shaped Pune's architecture. So if we go to the next slide, you'll find that in the early 20th century, most of the colonial vernacular architecture in Pune was actually designed by engineers and not by architects, because Pune had a long history with its College of Engineering, which is one of the first in India, and which served the whole Bombay presidency for quite a long time. So there were a lot of engineers who worked as architects and who designed these kind of colonial vernacular buildings. And a little later, if we go to the next slide, you can see a similar cosmopolitan influence in the Art Deco buildings, which were constructed. This one is the Bank of Maharashtra branch on Bajirao Road, which was designed by one of the first qualified architects in Pune, U.M. Apte. And if we go again a bit further in time, there's the interesting wave of modernist architecture, which arrived in the 60s. And you can see that it's a regional form of modernism. And these are some of the first apartment buildings which were in the form of cooperative housing societies. So in the next slide, when I completed this research, I got in touch with a lot of other architectural historians from Pune, but also from India and from abroad. And there's really a recent renewed interest, I would say, in Pune's modern architectural heritage. And there's been a great initiative launched recently, which is called Art Deco Pune, where they are mapping all the Art Deco buildings in Pune, and it's there on Instagram. You can check it out. And I'm very optimistic about exploring all this material further with students in the colleges. So yeah, that's in short.
Thank you very much, Sarah. There's so much for us to discover. I have to tell everyone that when we were all talking about things that we can do and see in Pune and throwing ideas about in a chat prepping, Sarah pulled out her PhD. She had her PhD thesis in her bag and would basically just look up and had it just had all sorts of things inside. It was like a magic document. And Sarah's PhD, of course, for anyone who's interested, and I'm sure many people will be, is on academia.edu. So if you look Sarah up, you can also grab yourself an e-copy of it, and it's an incredible document. So thank you very much for the work you've put in.
Thank you.
We'll now move to someone that Meenakshi called the original inhabitant of the city, which I thought was just a fantastic way of thinking about this. So to our fourth panelist, the very charming Jaanvi, thank you for joining us. And
thank you.
Tell us, what is your relationship with Pune?
Well, I am born here. I was born here in a place which is just barely 3 kilometers from MG Road, which is considered one of the hearts of the town, because there are many hearts and many colleges and many vital organs of this ever expanding town that is Pune, Pune, Punyanagari, all sorts of names. And people kept saying when we were kids, oh my God, you live in the jungle, you live so far away. And I just couldn't understand it, because we just had a lot of greenery between city and what are our outskirts of farms and orchards,
right,
which is all the surroundings of this town.
Shall we ask Dhwani to bring up some pictures for you?
Oh, sure.
There.
Thanks.
Yes. For us to get a sense of how green Pune is.
Yeah. So Pune is nestled just at the foothills of the Ghats and before it starts going into the Deccan Plateau. So because of that, so much water comes from all over and gives Pune so much variety of greenery. There are about 7 to 10 hills. I need to refer to my notes to tell you about it. So because of this, we have very, very many green spaces, and it was not very highly populated until about 10, 15 years ago. Post-liberalization, when the Indian economy so-called picked up, then all trades and professions picked up. So as a kid, I grew up over here in a very rustic environment where we went to St. Mary's School, we went to St. Helena's School, good little city boys and girls. But at home was always barefoot. There were sheep, there were cows, there were goats, there's farm, snakes, bulls. For entertainment, our mother used to say, okay, go down the road in the bullock cart and go count the bogies of the train, because that's how she used to keep us out of her hair. As my parents used to run this farm to fork enterprise, where they grew food and they served it to their customers farm fresh and ready to eat.
Don't you want to do the next image, please?
So
is this from your farm?
Yeah, this is a chiku flower. Chiku fruit. So I was able to take this picture last few months ago during lockdown, because during lockdown I've been around on this farm.
Right.
And it's really quite special to have grown up like this. We didn't understand that until we grew up. That, having access to soil, having access to fresh air, having access to fresh food is so very important.
Yeah.
Although it was very different being rustic 25 years ago. So yeah, this is a picture of Blossom. And this is an old shed that used to be my father's piggery in the 60s. And these are the kinds of sheds that used to exist. That you can see that it has all this vintage architecture with newfangled roofs that we have to put up for the elements. And that's our little dog, one of our farm dogs who we lost, unfortunately. Her name is Rani. She was very diligent. So Pune has this heritage of a lot of animals. Pune people have kept animals for generations and centuries.
There used to also be a zoo in Pune.
There is a zoo, and in fact, there's all these monuments also. So Pune has everybody. There's our presiding deity presently is Dagru Sheth, who you can see at the center of this image. And then we see that we have a synagogue, we have mosques, we have temples, we have vadas, we have Jamaat Khanas, we have all grounds and maidans and everything. It's like there's so many civil society institutions. It's just marvelous because everybody is nice and mixed and together.
Absolutely. And which is what I think makes Pune so interesting also. Because it's such a cultural capital. One thing that Pune has always been very well known for, and Meenakshi, I'm going to throw this in your direction, is literature. It has always been known as a city that has nurtured writers, whether it's for the film industry, whether it's written literature, even regional language press. So do you want to tell us all a little bit about literary landscape of Pune, and with a special focus perhaps on writing by women?
Yes, so as I said, Pune has a very engaged and very literary community, very progressive mindset. A lot of social reform was carried out through literature, through the poems of Savitribai Phule or Pandita Ramabai. Or in fact, there is also an organization called the Bhagini Sahitya Sammelan, which is a women's thing. And this was started, I think, in the early 1900s. It's also given rise to a lot of experimental writing. People were willing to push the envelope and change the different genres and formats. And so I would say it's a very, very vibrant, very open-minded, very creative city, a city that, because of the sheer fact of its history, nurtures that creativity.
So this actually brings us to the first question that someone has asked. The city has played a very important role during the Indian freedom struggle. How does that legacy still live on? Do you think you see that in literature?
I see that. I do see that whole thing of the liberty to be able to express yourself, the freedom of thought, freedom of expression, which is still there.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely.
Right, thank you. Nishita, do you see that the freedom extends to art and artistic landscape of Pune? What do you think that contemporary artists, what are they responding to?
I think contemporary artists are sort of torn between responding to the very rich cultural built heritage of Pune, but then they're also inspired by sort of the technology that they're surrounded by. There's a huge push. I'm seeing it especially with institutions like Goethe and TIFA and other individual players, where technology then takes sort of center space in the creative expression. So they're
Right.
making VR. There's a current project where art is being shown in public spaces where you can sort of walk around with your scanner and sort of experience it in a new way. So I think the freedom is there for sure to explore. What I would like to see though is more spaces showing local art. And I think that is something that a lot of people have been saying. And I've been talking to friends and sort of, this just to prepare for this conversation. And more spaces. I mean, we have a lot of galleries in Pune, but more the merrier.
Absolutely. I think when there are more spaces to look at art, it also nurtures. On the topic of heritage and dealing with with the historical background, Sarah, do you see architecturally what is the relationship that you see between Pune's built heritage, and it is quite substantial, and the contemporary?
I would say I don't see so much of continuity and response to the architectural heritage, except maybe in the practice of certain niche architects and clients who want to really build on traditional architecture. But I do see a major legacy of the past in the way the whole building sector is organized here and in what we call the building culture of the city. So by that, I mean the larger regulating context of how construction is organized. If you look at building bylaws, if you look at the way land gets converted into buildable land, but also if you look at the relationships between contractors, bureaucrats, engineers, developers, these are all legacies of past trends, and they really define what is possible architecturally in the city today.
Right. Jaanvi, coming to you, is there a relationship with natural heritage and how the city grows? Because there are movements, of course, and I think that there's a tension that we see between what is called development and an idea of conserving natural heritage. Where do you stand, and what do you see around you?
Well, we are one of the families who is so caught in the middle for this one, because while our families or clan has a history of developing farms, which are these massive permaculture clusters with entire communities in cooperation, and conservation of trees, of shrubberies, of bushes, all the things that make up a mixed ecosystem. We are people who have encouraged it, but then we too are developing our farm. And my forefathers have actually sponsored seminal architects and developers in order to build buildings and institutions that benefit society, because when we have these natural producer environments, we need institutions. So from producer companies or factories for our produce that can get built well and put out good nutritional facilities for people. Yeah. So it's really quite tough, because we also could not resist beyond the point to keep greenery open and accessible. But we managed to find a builder, for example, who now puts earth on the balconies so people can have entire gardens in their high-rise flat. So that was a solution that we could find, and somebody who uses earth to develop modern buildings instead of glass and chrome,
Right.
And Pune,
sorry, go on.
And one thing is that Pune has a lot of natural historians. It's very, very important to know this, because if anybody wants to find expertise, this town has very highly qualified, very sincere, very deep into their research and conservation efforts. So you'll find natural history people all over the place in Pune.
Right.
One commendation I must give is to Dr. Nilim Kumar Khaire, for example, because it's a very little known fact that all of the Deccan Plateau is home to all these marvelous snakes, because there's an entire subterranean life that is there below us. And because of his stewardship, he was able to educate people on how to conserve and preserve this magnificent participant of nature.
Right.
So
Thank you.
that's what I know.
Thank you. Fantastic. There's so much that we do need to talk about, and there are we can have several conversations, I think, for hours. But we also have questions from the audience coming in as we speak. So thank you very much for those questions, and please keep posting them. We will answer your questions. There's a question for Meenakshi, which I think is quite interesting, and it's a bit of a segue from natural and built environments to. So BB asks, how have immigrants shaped the identity of Pune? Like Meenakshi, you said that your family came from the Sindh. Would you like to take that question?
Yes, thank you. So immigrants have shaped the thing that, as I said, Mani's bookshop was started by an immigrant from Sindh, a displaced person from Sindh. Modern bookshop, Hindustan bookshop, which was in the market area, cantonment market area, which specialized in textbooks, was again started by things. Then we have the David Sassoon Synagogue, again an immigrant, which has contributed to Pune. So yes, I would say immigrants have come in and enriched a number of the sports shops. Kukreja Sports were all started by immigrants. The famous sweet shop, Karachi Sweets.
Yes.
Again, displaced person from Sindh. So yes, I would say they've come and they've enriched the society they're living in.
Absolutely. Thank you. We have another, thanks Meenakshi for that. We have a question from, I think is an old friend of ours from BDL days, Nishita, if it's the same Adil Desai. And he asks, having stayed both in Mumbai and in Pune, which of the two cities do you feel is better with heritage conservation and art propagation amongst the locals? That's very interesting, because what happens with community building? And Nishita, over to you.
It's a very difficult question to answer, to be very honest, because I think they're two different cities. Bombay is a lot more in the spotlight for its heritage conservation and its fight, like with, I know Art Deco, just to be certified as an Art Deco center by the UNESCO, they fought really hard. Whereas how would I say this? Let me find the question again. Have you deleted it?
I can ask you.
So, Haji.
Where did it go? Right. These are times when I should keep my glasses on.
Yeah.
So Adil's question is, having stayed in both Mumbai and Pune, which of the cities do you think is better with heritage conservation and art propagation amongst the locals?
So I would say both are equal. I think Bombay has managed to sort of break out of the local a little better. Pune that way is not, unfortunately, has not become known as sort of a producer of art, as it were. When you look at art centers, you always sort of gravitate towards Bombay, Delhi, to a certain extent, even Kolkata now, because of the sort of galleries coming up in those spaces. And I think in that sense, Pune needs more exposure on a national scale or an international scale, because the art is definitely there. The makers, the producers are here, the fabulous artists that we've been in touch with through these different organizations, they're there. It's just that they don't have the platform to showcase. Like, I think a very cool platform back then was the Pune Biennale.
Right.
Unfortunately, it sort of tapered off, but in the few the few editions that they had, I remember I got the 2017 one. They had a fabulous display at the Mahatma Phule Museum, I think it is.
Right.
Yeah.
I also see that there are these open air exhibitions. I don't know whether it was a COVID thing, but you drove by and there was sketching festivals that were happening and things. So that seemed quite, it was quite an engaged city in that sense, isn't it?
It is very, I mean, they have urban sketchers even in Pune. It's an online group that meets up quite regularly. A lot of these workshops and all happen, like the one I showed you before.
Yeah.
There's also an artist collective that's now come together to sort of just visit each other's studios. It's a mix of artists that are showing internationally and artists who are sort of just breaking onto the scene.
Right.
And it's quite interesting to see these sort of grassroots things take shape, because I think artists are now trying to put themselves out there. And with obviously the internet, it is easier then to sort of overcome barriers of being in a space
Oh,
that is not,
absolutely.
that is not Bombay or Delhi.
And now that the world is opening up, we can finally go to studios. So there's another question that I'll follow up with this, but in a few minutes, I want to bring Sarah in at this point and ask Sarah, when we're talking about local, we're talking about looking at art and heritage and identity. Do you think that Pune has a specific architectural identity, especially in the 19th and the 20th century?
I would say it's probably not specific so much to Pune, but maybe for the larger region. I think Bombay is, of course, an exception because of the political importance it had, the economic with the harbor, and then the geography, which gave a very particular architectural development in that city. But I think Pune is really a good representation of what many second-tier cities in Maharashtra, or maybe even the Deccan region, have in terms of architecture, the variety, and also the types of buildings you find. So, yes.
So, how would you characterize Pune's urban landscape then?
To me, what struck me is that it's so diverse, and as Jaanvi already mentioned, it exists really of different conglomerate of different areas which developed in different time periods and which have their own really urban fabric. So if you look at the old city, it's very dense, it has the old waras. Then you have the British cantonments, which were built along a grid pattern with huge garden compounds. And then we start having the planned developments, the township development plans, which were initiated after the First World War in Deccan Gymkhana is a good example of that. And so each of these areas has a particular flavor, and that's so wonderful because I've been here for 10 years and I still feel that there's so many things I still have to explore.
Of course. I think that's the beauty of a city. I mean, if in 10 years you exhausted it, then there would be a problem. Thank you, Sarah. We have a couple of very interesting questions. Jaanvi, perhaps you would like to take a shot at this one. Pune has served as a major influence on developing literary education and performing arts, even architectural influence on the rest of Maharashtra. Would you like to comment on the influence that Pune has had on the educational landscape?
Yeah, well, Pune is just magnificent for education. I had no idea that I was getting such a great education until I actually went to study abroad. And I'm just amazed because I received a lot of appreciation for the fundamentals that I studied in what we thought were ordinary schools, because St. Helena's was a very ordinary school, no fancy stuff, be simple, study hard. So we have education here where we can learn the ancient Indian arts. There are magnificent Ayurveda schools. There are magnificent Sanskrit, Marathi, and other Indian language bhasha, which is, high standard, high register of language. There are schools here for, you want to get a good Arabic and a good Urdu education, you can get it here.
Yeah.
It's just phenomenal. Then we go on to maths and sciences. The Pune University colleges are just fantastic. I don't have so many words because the education is so prolific. There are teachers and trainers all over the place because many, many professionals live here. So there are shalas. Independent people are coaches.
And languages too. Didn't you? I mean, foreign languages is something that Pune is known for.
Yeah, the Ranari Institute is premier, but does not, overshadow all of our colleges like Ferguson, Wadia, SP College, and all these lovely private universities that are the second generation, where we have symbiosis, we have medical schools like Bharati Vidyapeeth, we have D.Y. Patil, we have engineering schools that are just tremendous, College of Engineering, Pune, Maharashtra Institute of Technology, VJIT, whose full form I've forgotten. So it's just that education is a very, very, very important part of the fabric here.
Right.
That's the first priority. Pensioners town and students town. Between the pensioners had the paying guests, all these students from Iran, from Africa, from the Middle East, Yemen, Afghanistan. It's just
the world was here.
The whole world is here. In fact,
yes, it is absolutely.
Yes.
Meenakshi, tell me something. If one has to sort of discover Pune through its literature, and not just English, what would we read? Where would we go?
So we start off with Ani Lavchat, Punyachi Apurvai, pardon my pronunciation. We have Vijay Tendulkar's Ghashiram Kotwal, which describes Pune during the Peshwa's time. I would also say there is Vibhavari Shirke, who wrote about, she was also called Malubai Bedekar, who was a product of the Karve Institute, of Maharishi Karve's thing of women's issues there. Shanta Shilke, who wrote a poetry about women. There's Anike Javre and Raj Rao from the university, who are writing about contemporary issues about LGBTQ rights. And of course, from the English part of it, who can forget Farooq Dhondi's Pune Company, which is what I call my Facebook group. Pune Company. There's also a beautiful coffee table book that was done by Dr. Shamita Gupta, who's passed away sadly, and Jayashree Didi, and I would recommend that you get it. It's phenomenal. They've done so much research into that.
That's fantastic. And Nishita, thank you. If I extend this from literature to art, if we need to explore Pune and in terms of art, where would you send us?
It'll be a bit of it won't be a walk. Like I can confidently say, Bombay, I can take you on a walk of the art spaces. In Pune, it'll be like a really fast drive around. I would start off with TIFA, Working Studios. They have a phenomenal programming schedule coming up. They've got a new space that hopefully will have spaces for artists and artist design spaces for people to come and stay in. There'll be a coffee shop, bookshop, a display space, obviously a design studio, lots of different things happening in their space. Hop on over to Koregaon Park to visit two galleries there that I really love, VHC Gallery and Mona Lisa Kalagram. Both spaces very different in texture. Contemporary art being shown at VHC, whereas Mona Lisa Kalagram really gets into the feel of Pune. She gets everything from Dastakar Hut, coming there, and a furniture show that I've seen as well over there, a live music. Then I think I'd show you a few studio spaces, because I have a few dear friends who are generous enough with me to open up their spaces and show off their work, because I think it's a nice way to sort of get to know process and practice that way. So that would be it. And then another space that I've just been informed by a dear friend, Nachiket, who I think is on this call, is that because of its proximity to Bombay, the Abhinav Kala Mahavidyalaya used to have artist demos by even the moderns. So people like Raza Hussain, Barwe, whose work I have not seen enough of, even though I've seen an NGMA solo by him. They came and did artist demos at the college. So their works are still there. So I'm trying very hard to sort of, and now that I found out about it, I will try harder to get in and sort of see that, and maybe see that a little more, show people that.
Thank you. Along with, of course, we've spoken about art and literature and about urban heritage. What we haven't really spoken about
am I the only
at
one
all.
who can't hear you?
Sorry? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah can. All right, so can Meenakshi. Aruna Bakchi has raised a very interesting point, and this I'm going to ask both Meenakshi and Jaanvi to answer. One of the traditions Pune is proud of is its theatre scene. Any thoughts on its current profile among cities? And is it falling behind because of its local language emphasis? So, Jaanvi, shall we ask Jaanvi to start and then come to Meenakshi?
Yeah, I think both of us will cover two different languages also. So that's great because Meenakshi ma'am knows a lot about stuff. But recently I started my query into theatre and a focus on Marathi. And what I'm happy to report is that actually Marathi theatre is just doing better and better and better. There are more and more practitioners. They're much more progressive than we see in the English theatre or non-local language. Theatre is not developing enough. So Pune, in fact, has Bharatnatyam Mandir, which is a seminal research institute where more and more people are going there to research and put up plays. We've got about 15 to 20 experimental companies now in Pune, which is a big number. Grips Theatre had a big event this season because there was that gap between non-corona and corona. So Grips Theatre is a tradition that happens in town, in city, where adults play themes that are important for children. And these are life themes. So vernacular or Indian Marathi language theatre, for example, is doing really, really well. They are getting more and more contemporary in their practice. They're integrating a lot of global movement arts also, which is new. And traditional folk theatres could do with more sponsorship, more promotion, because these are a little bit more ethnic folks compared to Pune city educated people. So I think that's where that's a focus that some of us want to invest in, folk theatres, because it's rural, rustic.
No, also that these are ephemeral, right? If we don't spend time and effort in recording, in actively encouraging these are traditions that will disappear without a trace.
They're confirmed endangered now.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing that Pune has always been, and Meenakshi, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Pune is quite a snob when it comes to music, is it not?
Yes.
She says proudly.
Okay, yes. So we have the Savai Gandharva, which is one of the major Indian classical concerts that, take place every year in Pune in December. And they a very discerning, very snooty audience. And every classical music artist that I know of or have known of has said, if you can please a Pune Rasika, you can please the rest of India. But we also have a very vibrant Western music scene, whether it's pop or whether it's rock or whatever it used to be. A lot of homegrown bands like The Strangers, which used to be quite a hit when I was in college, to the Pune Music Society, which I think I've been attending a number of their concerts when I come in, where they bring in Western classical musicians to come to Pune and play. Again, very popular because of the large Parsi and the Goan and the Anglo-Indians and then the later immigrants. So yes, I think Pune is quite snooty where music is concerned.
There are lots of spaces to listen to a whole range. I had no idea that Pune at one point also had a vibrant jazz festival.
Very, very vibrant. I think they still do that at the Gyanadab Center. I don't live in Pune anymore, so I'm not 100% sure of it. But I know Gyanadab does the jazz mornings on a regular basis.
And while we're talking about music, we can't not talk about film. Sarah, when you were doing your research, did you also spend any time within these cultural sort of spaces between FTII and National Archives and these kind of urban spaces? Did you think that they had a resonance with the way the city was being built and inhabited?
I mostly focused on private archives, which were not yet researched, but I do know, I mean, if there's a question about the film and television, so these were former the Prabhat studios. And what I came to know is that it was designed by the very big hall where they actually rebuild the scenes for the movies, which has a huge span because you need a free space. So that was designed by N.G. Pawar, who was a very important engineer. He also designed SP College, and he was one of the first design and build contractors in Pune, and his hand is all over the city, actually. And he's a fascinating figure. One of his colleagues was Vasudev Kanitkar, who did Ferguson College. So around the turn of from the 19th to the 20th century, these engineers were really the prominent ones shaping Pune city, and they represent what was possible for Indians even in the late colonial period to construct a place like Ferguson College independently. So it's very impressive.
Right, thank you. Absolutely. I'm going to, Sarah, while you're still thinking about this, club two questions. The first is Aruna's question to you, and she says, what do you think of the contrast between Pune's heritage architecture and things that are happening, let's say, in Balewadi, which is down the road from where I am? That's more international. So she calls it more like New York. It seems to be the dominant form today. And Saz has a question that basically says Pune as a major industrial hub. So between industry and this kind of demand for offices and IT, what is the contrast? What do you think of the contrast, and how do you think that Pune does in this space?
I think we cannot compare Pune from before the 1960s to today's Pune. And I think that was really a key moment where, with the upcoming industries in Pimpri Chinchwad, but also in Hadapsar and other industrial towns, there was a lot of workers who were in need of houses. So we saw the first urban sprawl, which was actually in the form of bungalow colonies, small cooperative housing societies, small plots and workers and houses. And this, gradually kept on intensifying. When the IT business came, we see that you have these integrated townships, which are emerging on the fringes. So around Hinjawadi, we get the towers. So it's difficult to compare these two periods in terms of what the architecture was doing, right? Yeah. There is an incredible need for housing, and because of the complexity and the fact that the government wasn't an efficient provider, developers really took control and became very important to answer to this need. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the architecture has to change over time. Right. And I think there are also signs that I do think that in the future, developers will continue to be very powerful in shaping the city. But there is a change in how they operate. For instance, if you look at Magarpata city, the developer there didn't buy the land from the farmers. The farmers actually pooled their land together, and they became the shareholders of a development company which built Magarpata. So they are still shareholders of that company, and they still every year get the profits from the scheme. So in terms of land acquisition, but also in terms of architectural quality, I'm quite hopeful that there are positive changes, and we will see a lot of good architecture coming up in the future, because as developers have to compete, as the markets get saturated, we will see improvement, I think, in quality.
Right. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And, I think that it's always a delicate balance between living a certain way and modern necessities of life. And I think Pune, over the years, suddenly, just very quickly became very overwhelmed by the influx of people as well, didn't it? While it was doing all of this, I see a question from. Well, this is a complete non sequitur now, but I shall ask this. Meenakshi, this is for you. From social history to children's literature, Pune has been paving the way for Marathi literature around the world. Can you tell us about the legacy? So the literary legacy of the city, Meenakshi, where do you peg it now?
Very progressive, very open. Look at the amount of small presses that publish little magazines, articles, the very vibrant Marathi newspapers, Prabhat Kesari, all of them. I also see great hope because there's so many publishers who are based in Pune, Vishwakarma, Madhushri Prakashan, Mehtab Sons, and they're not afraid to take chances with translations as well.
Right.
So I find that, yes, Pune has a great legacy that it has, and it has a great future for Marathi literature.
That's fun. And I think that, the fact that there are so many presses, there are people who are reading, you can still have, it needs more bookstores though.
It's more bookstores. But look at the popularity of the Diwali Ank, right? Which are these magazines, which are literary magazines, which come out every Diwali, and people so look forward to them. I think the Kirloskar Press was one of the first. Stand me if I'm wrong, correct me, but I think they were one of the first to start the Diwali Ank.
Wow.
And yes, but there are also a number of libraries that are there, right, in Pune, which provide accessibilities. There are, I think, 20 or 25 libraries which provide accessibility to literature. Pune also had that legacy before the TED Talks of the Vasant Vyakhan Mala, things started by Justice Ranade, which was a lecture series every year in the spring about a different aspect of history, of literature, of social reform, of sciences. So I think there is a lot that Pune still has, and will continue to have.
That sounds very promising. I think the fact that the archives are here too. Someone was mentioning the film archives.
National Film Archives.
The fact that FTII has now, of course, while it's encouraging new filmmakers, but the films division and everyone, they still screen. You can go ahead and watch a film from a few years ago, and those archives are right here. Of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to keep them accessible, to keep them in good shape.
There were lots of film clubs as well, Aparna Ashray Film Club and all. Also Pune-based filmmakers like Jayu and Nachiket Patwardhan.
Yes, absolutely.
They did such fantastic movies, right?
Yes, I think what I really like about the city is that is its sheer range, and Nishita will I think have something to say about this. That art or literature is not, it's not held to one specific pigeonhole. I know someone here who's an illustrator and a ceramicist and an artist, and then also goes ahead and teaches. Nishita, when you're looking at art and you're going to studios around Pune, what are you're not only meeting painters.
No, it's quite a diverse range of practitioners, which is why I say arts. It's not just the visual arts. And even within the visual arts, it's not just sort of painting. It's somebody who will go across medium. Like, for example, the stitching circle that I'm part of, there is somebody who curated, Bharti Lalwani, who curated an exhibition on scent and how it was seen through miniature paintings.
Yes.
There's somebody else who's working with VR and Anoki, I think, I don't remember her last name, but she's developing. And this is all while trying then to have also something to do with stitching and fiber and materials, because obviously post-pandemic, we've realized the need to touch things, to be in contact with people and have tactile hobbies, if you want to call them. So I think it's really interesting. Like, for example, Nachiket, again, I'm going to bring him up. But he makes sculpture, he does digital work, he does photography, he teaches. And I've seen this across, because also I think because Pune is a small city, and this is sort of my experience of living in small cities, everyone knows everyone.
Yes.
Like, I have just met these three lovely ladies, but I have known you for, I think, a decade now. If I dig a little bit, I'm sure there's 2 degrees of separation between me and
everyone. Absolutely, everyone seems to know everyone from either school or college, or just
exactly, or just
inexplicably.
They shared a wall. Like, for example, Jaanvi was saying she shared a wall with Sarah for the longest time. And I think that sort of proximity to other people and that need to form communities, whether you've been here long or whether you've just moved here, allows people to exchange sort of ideas. You make ceramic, oh, I want to try my hand at it. Like Ruby Junjunwala is one of the most well-regarded local ceramic artists, and she does massive commissions. But then she also does, like at the Mandai, she was selling little pomegranates, ceramic pomegranates. She teaches artists, younger artists like Rajeshri Gudi, I know, has moved away from making paper and into ceramic production because she again had access, thanks to TIFA, to these sort of networks. So it's almost like, you know, those lovely diagrams where everybody sort of goes over.
It's crossing. And I think that overlapping interests basically get nurtured, right? From old friends to, you know, your brother, sister's aunt will take you with them somewhere. The other very interesting aspect about Pune is, of course, that it is also a city that has several museums. Nandan Shastri is asking about Pune's legacy in museums, like the Dinkar Kerkar Museum for sure, the Tribal Museum. There are several.
Fire Museum.
Sorry?
Fire Station Museum. There's a cycle museum.
Yeah, and a train one.
Yeah, I only found them in the pandemic. I'm very sad about it, but I've marked them on my to-go list in Pune, and I'm hoping soon.
I think, Nishita, you and I will have to go see. I'm a pandemic immigrant to Pune, as it were. So and haven't really stepped into many of these places. But the fact that there are vadas that you can go to, right? There are private collections that need to be explored. I think with Pune, it's so rich that it's a city that also takes its heritage for granted to a certain extent. And then there's contemporary Pune that exists within these places. I'm going to move to recommendations very quickly, but I have to say, when I moved here and I wanted to do a bit of shop, someone said, anything you need, you find in Tulshibag.
Yes.
I mean, you know, that's what we thought about Crawford Market. No, Jaanvi, you don't agree?
So, not anything, but some things you can only find in Tulshibag.
Like, what are those things? Let's get local.
Really nice mortar pestles for kitchen. Really nice. In Tulshibag. Marble ones, little ones. So all sorts of nice heritage kitchenware.
Right.
Mandai, Tulshibag, that is the destination. Remember, you can ask them to get your name put in...
on the Barneys.
On
Yes.
On Barneys.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Meenakshi, when you have to shop, where do you go?
Where, Pune?
Yeah.
I go down Main Street because that's where I grew up. Center Street, where my silver guy used to be. Yes. And a lot of it was, I went into Tulshibag because I like buying old brass things. People used to have this thing where you came in and sold your brass and bought stainless steel. Right. So I would go and buy those old bartans, old idols, and bring them back home here with me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you see the thing of modernizing. Nobody wanted that car. There was this Panchadhatu, which is the 5 metals, bell metal and things. Bartans which were being sold from older homes in Pune for the sake of modern convenient stainless steel. So I would go to Tulshibag on a hunt for those. Lots of beads, funny beads I go to Tulshibag for. I really find, irregularly shaped, colorful things. Yeah. So definitely, but Main Street, a lot of Main Street.
A lot of Main Street. Sarah, what were your haunts?
I recently discovered actually a small, very nice khadi shop located in the Central Bee Research Trading Institute opposite Agriculture College.
Yes, I've been there.
And it's called the Shaka Story. And it's beautiful pieces, well designed. Yeah. So the modern twist to khadi fabric. That's the place I want to share.
Thank you. Meenakshi, were you saying something?
Yeah, unfortunately, there are not so many bookshops left in the campsite other than, I think, Express on East. But Deccan has a lot more, which I still haunt, Popular Bookshop and a couple of others, on that road leading up to Karve Road. So yes, bookshops otherwise used to be a big haunt for me in Pune.
In camp, you have the word bookshop, which is really nice. You should check it out. Word
is-
Bookshop. It's near Booty Street, and it has architecture, cultural arts.
Yes, I should do that the next time I'm in Pune.
You might find a book that you can't reach. It's chock-a-block full of books. It's a very charming place.
Oh, great. Because there used to be a lot, even now there was a lot, a very small bookshop and things, but now there's nothing. I feel so bad. And Crossword sells these horrendous pink stuffed teddy bears and things next to their books.
Oh, let's not go there, Meenakshi. Crossword is a gift shop. Nishita, I'm going to prod you into the direction of a very interesting place that you took me to,
Which one?
the handmade paper place.
Yes. So there are a few places. The few times that I do step out, because I'm going to admit on record that I do shop on Amazon. It's the convenience of it. But the times that I do shop out, it is to go buy paper. Pune Handmade Papers is at the Abel Chowk. You can check them out on, I think, Abel Chowk, if I'm not mistaken. You can just Google them, you'll find them. Another place that I love is Marzurin. It's right on MG Road. Chicken mayo sandwiches, hello. I would like a discount. Another place that is totally for me in Pune is, and I think I've gifted enough people things from there. It's the Recharkha. They upcycle plastic. And I have this thing for washing and drying and saving all my plastic. So I go drop it off. And since I've made the trek to the other side of the city to Recharkha's office, I then buy and come back. So it's like a nice 2-for-1. They use plastic, they weave it into sort of bags, and they use it as fabric to make bags, pouches, book covers, gym bags, everything. So you probably have something from there.
Yes.
The other place I do enjoy browsing around in is this place called ABC in Pune, which is also known as Appa Balwant Chowk, where you get all the books and textbooks and academic books. Interestingly enough, it's called ABC for some reason.
I only know of farms that are called ABC.
Exactly.
No, this is called Appa Balwant Chowk.
I thought cheese. She said ABC and I thought cheese.
Yes, Nishita, it is getting to wine and cheese o'clock.
This was when I went to Ferguson. Everybody said, go to ABC, you'll get all the books you need. So they turned out to be a place called Appa Balwant Chowk.
I'm making
right. Okay. Nish, just before we get to Jaanvi for her recommendations, Dr. Shibu Nair asks, is there anything on slum art in Pune? Is there?
I don't know what they mean by it. I would love to take that question, but I wouldn't be able to answer that at this point.
Right. Sarah, Jaanvi, Meenakshi, I'm going to ask any, please answer this if you can. How vibrant are places like Alandi, Dehu, and other religious spaces in Pune? Jejuri, of course, features quite heavily within the landscape. Very, very quickly, Sarah, is there an architectural element you'd like to focus on?
I think there are the ghats, right, in Alandi, and
yes,
which are very important. So that is what I remember from going there. But I think it's lovely. It has its own identity, and there's a lot of things happening when you walk around. There are special shops for all the rituals which are conducted there. And so, yes, it's one of the other vibrant places near Pune, which we forgot to mention so far.
Yes. Meenakshi?
Yes, for me, it's associated with Tukaram and Namdev and Jnaneshwar and the Abhangs and the whole thing with Marathi bhakti poetry.
Yes.
So for me, Alandi and Pandhalpur and all these are associated with oral traditions of Marathi poetry. It was never written. And some of it was written by women. A lot of it were the women's ovis, which we, are is the poetry that was written by them while they were doing their the Varkaris.
Yes.
Right? While they were doing the pilgrimage.
Yes, indeed.
Sorry, just because she brought that up, I was lucky enough to catch this lovely young girl called Shruti Vishwanathan, who actually is trying to revive all of these. And I'm not very familiar with it, but she does these performances of these very poems. But then she also then does the English with it. So for me, it was a nice way to get introduced to it. Again, I got to catch it at TIFA. And it's not something that I would otherwise have access to understand, but because she did it in 2 languages, I was able to access it. Yeah, just wanted to bring that up. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It sounds very interesting. And someone in the audience also agrees. Because Asad has appeared, we will have to wrap up quickly. But Jaanvi, your recommendations and fine. Yes, please.
Well, food. So for food, for sure, Chitale Bandhu is a very important port of call. Kayani.
Hang on, I have to interrupt to say, you said Chitre Bandhu, we lost power, which never happens. And you said Chitre Bandhu and the electricity is back.
There you go. Let there be light.
Let there be light.
Yeah.
Delight indeed.
Delight for sure. So food-wise, Chitare Bandhu is a go-to. Then we have to go to Kayani Bakery because the Shrewsbury biscuits, and then there's City Bakery got those pies in the morning. Please go get the walnut pies in the morning. All our lovely Udupi breakfast haunts, misar pav. I could go on and on. For curios, I think shopping, I really want to point out one lovely store on Ferguson College Road. It's called Mother Quilts. They've actually collected traditional Indian sheep wool blankets from all over the Deccan Plateau. So this is an important store. If you want an heirloom blanket, Mother Quilts is the place to go to. On Ferguson College Road. It's a special mention. Either or is the consummate Indian contemporary design house. Nobody does it better than either or because they collect and curate from all over the country. A lot of lovely handmade arts and crafts. And every time I get something from there, people are like, wow, that's so cool. I'm like, yeah, it's nice on the pocket too. So don't miss that. And markets, Shivaji Market, Gultekdi Market, Mandai, Khadda Market, because fresh food is the heritage of Pune. Buy fresh, eat fresh, 2 rupaye ka mirchi, 5 rupaye ka limbu. It's all coming from all the villages close by around here, so all the farmers will love you.
I have to admit, food and fresh produce is such a it's such a charm, and I mean, I have a longer list to add to this, and I can't let this go without saying that the best crisps in the world come from Pune, and that's
Budani.
I mean, the reason why I moved was Budani chips.
That's a very good reason.
Best, yes.
Lakshminarayan Chuda.
Lakshminarayan Chuda, yes.
Hakarwadi.
Yes. Hakarwadi, yes. Kaka Halwai.
We get all of that here.
Now you know why I have put on about 15 kilos in the year that I've moved, because I've been constantly eating. And this is in addition to all the home cooked food that we get everywhere.
Oh, Kausar Bagh for Afghan and Arabian food.
Bismillah in camp.
Yes.
Okay.
Dorabi's biryani.
Oh, yes.
And Sujata Mastani.
Yes. Oh my God.
This is my cue. I'm going to quickly run out now because I'm getting very, very hungry. Asad.
See, this is not fair because you all can run out and go eat all this while we are just sitting here and salivating. Kayani's came up at the end, but that's my childhood memory of going to Pune with my parents, and now when I go with my daughter, we stop by at Jala Loop and then proceed to Pune very often. But thank you so much to our speakers. I've been getting so much feedback already from a lot of attendees. What an interesting session and so rich, and so thank you. And you're the ones who rightfully have made us see why it's called the Queen of the Deccan. And you all mentioned Nishita, you mentioned Tifa a couple of times, and we've done so much work with them in the last 2 years. I think we've had them on 3 panels in the last 2 years. Hence, I didn't invite them to this, otherwise they would have also been a lovely addition. But they're a fantastic.
You cannot do anything in Pune without Tifa. I honestly believe that.
I mean, we weren't even looking at Pune. We were just looking at cool people
Yeah.
doing cool
Yeah.
things, you know.
Krishna
And
rocks,
we
honestly.
said, yeah, yeah. But thank you so much, Aparna, and Live History India for partnering with us. And Aparna is fantastic as usual. And today she's in her elements because she's in
Yeah.
her hood. So I think we
Friends.
always say this at the end, like Aparna, and we say, okay, now we're going to go to Hyderabad, and we're going to go here, and we're going to go meet all these people and eat this. So now we can't go. I'll have to come, but I come anyway to Lonavala. So for me, it's just a little short journey down the road.
Yeah, come
So we
on.
will be there, and I want to go and eat all those food items I mentioned. But thank you, honestly, guys, and mostly to our audiences for tuning in. I know life has gone back to normal in many places, and then maybe taking some turns here and there. But thank you for making the time to tune in to these sessions. We have many more interesting programs planned. In fact, our next session is on Saturday, where we have an in-person workshop on narrating stories for episodes by award-winning screenwriter Satyanshu Singh, which is going to be at our office at SR House, and followed by many other programs. So for that, you just have to stalk us on social media or check out our website. But thank you once again to this wonderful panel, and especially you to Aparna for so skillfully navigating this session. And
Really.
hopefully we shall see you all soon in the Queen of the Deccan. Thank you.
Thank you.